Hi, welcome to National Ability Summit 2020. I'm Rakhi Bakshi, your host and moderator for the session. And we are, of course, talking about a theme on a day which is celebrated internationally. It's the International Day for Persons with Disabilities, persons who are, very, very special amongst us. And we have started yesterday talking about this theme, something which talks about the inclusive atmosphere in the universe. And what a delight it is to talk about that. I welcome all the panelists and I welcome all the organizers and also congratulate them that this event is taking place. We'll be talking to many minds. We are talking about people who we really value. And let me first start by introducing myself and to give you a pictorial description here. Of course, my name is Rakhi Bakshi, and I'm wearing a red jacket, also a pair of glasses, black hair, a little reddish lipstick, and a necklace which it can be seen. And I'm also very privileged to start this show right now, this session right now. And let us first of all introduce everyone, each of you, who's very special for this session. And we will talk about, first of all, let me introduce Mr. Parul Sharma. Very happy to have you here, Ms. Sharma, who's a city planner working towards promoting accessibility and inclusion in contemporary and future cities and has been advocating the rights of persons with disabilities. He has 13 years of full-time work experience in management consulting, project and program management, and working on urban management projects across environment, urban planning, sanitation, solid waste management, and urban infrastructure sectors in various cities in India. He's worked extensively in many states of India on financial and development assistance assignments. As far as interpersonal skills are concerned, he's worked on a variety of working environments. He has experience in facilitating high level meetings also with ministers and other senior government officials and partners to promote public policy. He has the strong acumen to identify new synergies with governments across centers and state and across the length of products and services and work cohesively towards enabling the same. Mr. Palu Sharma, thank you so much for joining us here, and we will, of course, be talking to you further. Next is Ms. Anita Narayanan. Very welcome, warm welcome to you, ma'am. Somebody who's, again, an expert on accessibility, diversity, and inclusion, a consultant, a disability rights advocate, and founder, of course, and sponsor and managing trustee of Ekansh Trust, based in Pune. Somebody who's been empaneled by the Government of India Ministry of Social Justice and Empowerment with the Department of Empowerment of Persons with Disabilities. And of course, audit is something which she does also, and something which we will be talking about when we further talk to her. She has basically been an expert who's talked vocally about inclusive education, so takes keen interest on subjects which involve those. And then, of course, somebody who's been really been on media platforms when we've seen her talking about these issues with passion and experience, of course. Thank you so much for being with us. The next one, who's of course joining us here, is Kush Kanodia, who's the Chief Disability Officer of Kaleidoscope Group of Companies. He's a social entrepreneur, disabled BAME system leader, and champion for equality and inclusion, creates systemic changes for the benefit of disabled people, and focuses on the intersection between disability, health and well-being, technology and accessibility, sports and inclusion, employment and entrepreneurship is something that he works on. And of course, he's been a torch bearer for the Paralympic Games in London 2012, among the top 10 most influential BAME leaders in technology. In 2019, he received the Asian Achievers Award for Entrepreneur of the Year, and also included in the BAME 100 Business Leader Index by Green Park, and received the Social Entrepreneur of the Year award by TIA in London. The most important thing, he has led the No Wheelchair Tax campaign to success, transforming the NHS in England, His new campaign is to create a standardized and compassionate disabled ranked parking policy for London, England, and the UK. We will be talking about that to you, sir. Very, very delighted to have you amongst us. And of course, Mr. Gaurav Raheja, somebody who's a professor of architecture, a design thinker, and a well-known expert in universal design, accessibility, and inclusion from IIT Roorkee, and professor in charge for inclusion and accessibility services, of course, with IIT Roorkee. A key advisor and consultant for various accessibility projects under Accessible India campaign, including audit of Prime Minister's office, railway station, IVI airport, among several others, has been appointed now as a consultant with the National Institute of Urban Affairs, which is a prime body working on this theme, and delivered several talks and keynote addresses. He has been awarded the Emphasis Universal Design Award in 2010 by the National Center for Employment of Disabled People. So welcome all of you. We are all here. The day is very special, as I said, and we share, I'm sure, the same thought and feeling to talk about more and more inclusivity, also to support, salute disabled people, not only in India, but across the globe, and how and what we can do to really give them a hand, give them a shoulder, and that's where we are. So first of all, I would actually like to go to Mr. Gaurav Raheja. Mr. Raheja, the architecture around it, I mean, we can in fact see that very beautiful behind you in the background is something that you're talking about. And whenever we are talking about, the whole inclusive part of how we should look at disability, architecture is something which really importantly comes before us. It should be at the forefront, because when we're talking about transportation, we're talking about accessibility. I think that's something which is very, very important. So could you just throw some more light on that as to how and what kind of steps are being taken on that?
So thank you, Rakhi. Am I audible?
You are, sir.
Okay. So thanks, Rakhi. Thanks, Varisa, and thanks for organizing this entire event, which brings us all together. Before I begin my sharing in response to Rakhi, I have just this feeling, and I'm just echoing it here, that I wish that this International Day of Persons with Disabilities could actually transform for future years into International Day of Accessibility as well. While we celebrate diversity of existence, I wish we also celebrate the constructiveness about this discourse that can actually bring more inclusivity. And that can only happen when we start talking more about access, enablement, empowerment than only about the challenges that we have to face. Having said this, on a note of architecture, I think many times in my engagements with young students as well, and that's a question that even I ask to myself. Tell me, where is architecture not? Right from the day when you're born in a shelter. Even if those unfortunate situations where the birth has happened even on a street, even street is a component of architecture. Even a ground and an open space is an experience of architecture. And even a built form that humans try to shape around is also a piece of architecture. And incidentally, the backdrop that I have right now is nothing but my own institution, that's IIT Roorkee, which was also built by the British. And when we built, one of the biggest questions that we have is, what is the longevity of what we are building? In comparison to, suppose you build an application or a software, how long does a software or a mobile phone last? I'm looking at a very strong perspective here. And this perspective is that a product's lifetime is usually 1 year, 2 years, 5 years, at the max, maybe 10 years. But when you actually build a building or a structure, I think you're building for generations with very little chance to make any repairs or any mistakes. And that's the point where I bring the seriousness of this debate, that when you build, let's try that we build for forever and for everyone. And I think this has been a message of the 20th century mistakes that we have done to our architecture that I hope the 21st century can correct. Accessible India campaign, through which I have been associated with the government of India, I think is a fairly wonderful move. And I must make a small clarification here. The campaign was set in 2015, launched by our Honorable Prime Minister, and in 2016 was the new act, which is the Rights for Persons with Disabilities Act, that came on the ground. So the campaign was launched just before the launching of the act. It was very, very nicely positioned, I must say. And one of the key mandates of Accessible India campaign was to bring accessibility in the conversation of all ministerial circles or all governmental circles, and from there translate into civic body circles. So yes, I would say a lot of initiatives were taken, to the extent even when you see a smart city campaign, a lot of street city campaigns, for example, development of the metro systems. So of course it started in New Delhi, but it started spreading around the rest of the India also. What started in with ITDP programs on developing streets. So I believe now Pune is also part of it. Chennai has been doing part of it. Chandigarh city has done some initiatives on it. So a lot of work has been spreading in some pockets here and there, but I believe this is a forum now to awaken the fact that Accessible India campaign was not a campaign for 1 year. It's a campaign which has to be now carried forward by the citizens, by us as professionals, and not leave it only onto the shoulders of the government, because public has an immense role to take accessibility onto the ground. And that's where I would say the experience of that is visible in the airports, in the metro rails, in some NMT transports as well. But I definitely say that a lot has still to be done. And I believe we all should join hands to take those steps further as well.
So I would now like to go to Madam Anita and say that you're talking about conducting barrier-free architecture and talking about universal design, and what in fact Mr. Raheja has just said, something similar to that. When you talk about this whole accessibility part, how would you think we can actually reduce, when you're talking about barriers, but also facilitating in terms of design? Of course, Accessible India has a vast framework, and as Mr. Raheja shares also. What would you say, talking about this whole idea of inclusivity and what more can be done? What would you say, Anita ji, can be done in this regard?
Thank you very much, Rakhi, for that question. And since we had been asked to introduce ourselves pictorially, I need to introduce myself as Anita Iyer Narayan from Pune. I'm a 53-year-old with graying hair. I'm wearing a light green shirt, and here I am talking to all of you. I'm in my home office, and I'm speaking from here. So when we talk about universal design and we talk about accessibility, like Gaurav said, it can't be a one-point focus. It has to be a 360-degree approach to accessibility. Also, all the stakeholders have to be taken into consideration when we are talking about accessibility. Does everybody understand what accessibility means? So when you look at the logo of my NGO, it says awareness, acceptance, sensitization, and then inclusion, which means, are we aware of what we are really doing? So while there are rules and regulations and standards that have already been laid down, have they been well explained to all the stakeholders? Do people with disabilities understand their rights and understand what accessibility in relation to their own disability means? Does somebody on a wheelchair know what to expect when he goes to a place when he talks about accessibility? When you're making single structures accessible, for example, if you make, say, a hospital completely accessible, how do I get there from my residence? Who are the people who are actually authorizing and commissioning these buildings, these structures? So are we working as one whole team? So like Gaurav said, street design, footpath design, which is the pavement design, transportation design, people who are in all of these departments, people who are authorizing buildings to be constructed, everybody has to first be made aware of what accessibility means for people with different disabilities. When you give them a mandate or you give them a standard list to follow of accessible features, they may or may not be able to implement it correctly. So there is a huge job of sensitizing people and making them actually aware of what we are talking about. my father always said that you should define the terms you use before you use them. So, what is accessibility? Has everybody understood? So, while there are experts who understand, if I say universal design now to this group, everybody will understand. But when I walk into a government building or into a municipal building and I tell them, your space is not accessible or my street is not accessible, will they understand what I'm saying, or does the explanation have to happen all over again? So, I think the beginning has to be awareness among students of architecture, civil engineering, city planning, etc. The entire city has to be planned by one single team. We cannot do piecemeal planning of a city. It does not look like one cohesive whole thing. So we have to have a cohesive, coherent, collaborative team that looks at accessibility for a city, so that it looks like one complete whole, not like a jigsaw puzzle that you have put together. So I think awareness, I think, is the first step. I have always said this, and I will continue to say that being aware of what we are talking about as universal design and accessibility is very important, because accessibility actually impacts the dignity of a person with a disability. Nobody wants to be picked up and taken from point A to point B. You don't want to be carried in your wheelchair or outside of your wheelchair from point A to point B. Everybody has personal dignity. If you look at all the phases in your life, right, like Gaurav said, from birth, you talk about education. Are your schools accessible? Is the school bus accessible? Is the road leading from your house to the school accessible? And then you talk about inclusive education. Then you talk about employment the same way. So when you talk about employment of people with disabilities, you may have a 3% quota of people with disabilities in your company, but did they have the 3% quota in the academic institutes that they went to? Were they able to access those academic institutes? Now, of course, with COVID, everybody is studying from home and working from home. It's made things a lot easier, I must say, and this is a different world now, a new normal. But talking about our generation, talk about going to a place of work, going to a place of education, accessibility has to be understood by every stakeholder in their entire process for it to be actually implemented correctly.
Okay. So, from Dr. Raheja to Anita ji, now I would like to go to Kush and ask, talking about structural accessibility also, as she said, Anita ji, that how, institutions, offices, different buildings can actually not only understand, but actually take proper action also on that. These are actionable steps that I think organizations, institutions have to take. So what is being done and what needs to be done, if you can throw some light on that.
Thank you, Rakhi. Thank you, Varija. It's a real honor to be here at the National Ability Summit on the UN Day for Persons with Disabilities. So I'll do a quick descriptor for myself. I'm a British Indian man. I've got short black hair, wearing glasses. My shirt is white, it's got red checks. It's not contrasting as much as I would have liked from the white background. So I'm also wearing a red scarf. So I wanted to go through 6 points in relation to your question. So as Anita and Gaurav has said, I think it's really important to have an integrated approach to accessibility. It's important organizations think about the whole journey in relation to accessibility. So for example, if your building has step-free access, but your local tube station, your local train station is not accessible for disabled people, if you don't provide free disabled parking, then I don't believe you're fully accessible as an organization. I believe that all organizations should be doing accessibility audits of the whole portfolio, as well as the virtual environment. I actually believe these should be mandatory for all organizations, and they should be published so people can actually review them. But I understand that, let's focus first on the public sector. This is something I've been trying to push in the UK. And then from that, let's transition to the private sector. I think it's really important we have bespoke workplace assessments for all disabled people, incorporating, as you've been quite rightly mentioned, universal design principles for both the physical and the virtual environment, implementing reasonable adjustments to enable disability inclusion in the workplace. It's really important to have mobility forums. I'm a strong believer in the disability mantra, nothing about us without us. periodic meetings of disabled people who can give you live, real-time feedback in relation to the true state of play in relation to accessibility. So this happens with my local borough, the Royal Borough of Kensington and Chelsea, and it's very helpful to the local council. Then I also wanted to look at this aspect of compliance and going beyond compliance. So the UK government has recently implemented a mandatory implementation for changing places toilets for public sector buildings. So this has basically been made compulsory. So changing places toilets are larger than traditional accessible toilets, 12 meters squared. They have a hoist for severely disabled people. And then also this aspect of going beyond compliance. And I like to think of it as proportional representation. So we had a big battle with the Premier League in the UK. It was a 10-year battle to make all football clubs proportionally representational for disabled people. Because the challenge we have sometimes is organizations can meet the legislation, equalities law, and be accessible. But if you just have a tokenistic 1 or 2 wheelchair spaces that are not proportionally representational to the number of disabled people who use wheelchair, then to me, you're not actually living the spirit of the law. So I think it's really important that organizations are proportionally representational. I'd just like to finish by saying that when we design for disability, we design for the benefit of everyone.
Yeah. Okay, thank you so much for very, very, I think, keen insights that you are providing through your suggestions here. Thank you so much, Push. We would like to go to Parul here, Mr. Sharma. When we're talking about this whole chain of how do we go about accessibility, right from home to then schools, then colleges, as Anita also said, how do we actually understand first, make ourselves aware, and then work on that? So what would you say, how if families, if they want to really be, houses, for example, or universally, for example, if one wants to be supported there in terms of the infrastructure, what help and support one can get? I mean, talk about, let's say, help and support in terms of financial ones, in terms of, other societal ones. What would you say can be done? Throw some light on that. How do we put in structure right from the beginning, right from the primary, basic platform? Mr. Parul Sharma.
Yeah. Thanks, Raghi. So, first of all, I would like to give my pictorial representation. Like, I am a typical 36-year-old North Indian male, and I'm sitting in my living room, wearing a white shirt with navy blue blazer. And coming to your question, Raki, first of all, I would like to congratulate Varija Life for taking this initiative of, initiating a dialogue, bringing global expertise and local expertise together at same platform. Coming to your question, what kind of support one can get, be it an individual or institution? I think this is your question, right? So honestly speaking, even though intentions of government are very good and government is doing a lot of work promoting, advocating for, safeguarding the rights of persons with disabilities and making all public institutions and facilitating and encouraging private partners to make their spaces accessible. But I am afraid to say that there is no single policy in the country where you can get financial support from the government for making your premises accessible. Knowledge sharing and technical knowledge dissemination could be given by the government. But as far as we talk about financial cost sharing or giving some incentive, that part is missing. And I think I would also like to add at this juncture, at the outset, like Dr. Gaurav Reja mentioned, that Accessible India campaign was launched at the very right time of, before promulgating the RPWD 2016 Act. So government's intentions are good and they have done their part. So this is the time that when society should come forward and every individual should consider as individual social responsibility of, talking out about accessibility and working towards facilitating it and realizing it. Because ultimately, person with disabilities or people having other kind of physical challenges like our senior citizens or children or women with medical conditions. So they are diverse in their own sense, and diversity is the reality. So we need to honor that. And it's the duty and responsibility of everyone involved in the, urban development sector to make sure that all the infrastructure we develop is accessible in nature. I personally feel as an urban planner and a faculty in various government institutions that we have failed as designers, architects, planners, engineers, and social anthropologists because we left one section of society totally segregated. And I strongly feel that it is not a particular section of society, rather it touches upon every family in the country. Like Census of India says that 2% of the population is person with disabilities. But World Bank and UN, which gives a more correct figure as per 2011 data, that there are around 10 to 15% persons with disabilities in the country. And this was when there were 7 categories before RPWD 2016 Act came into existence. Now, persons with disabilities have 21 categories. So my assumption is that at least 22 to 25% of the total population in this country is person with disability. And if you imagine a household size of at least 4.5 in a populated country like India, you will see that almost every family has a relative, a friend, or a colleague who is a person with disability. So this is one issue which should be talked about in every family. It touches upon everybody. So we all have grandfathers and our parents in our families who have limitations in accessing various services and products and various physical spaces in the city. To add to, coming back to your question, I want to share that there is a small budget within the government departments which has not been promoted well amongst various government machineries, which says that under the head other administrative expenditure, around 2 to 3% of the expenditure could be made towards making our premises accessible. So this financial support exists in the budgetary mechanism for only government establishments, but for private and individual establishments there is no such provision. But yes, government can take initiative. I think from this conference only we can make some recommendation to the government, and I am quite sure government will welcome this.
I'm sure these are very, very valid inputs and points which are coming here through all your voices, suggestions, and expertise. And I think these are should be taken as notes to take home or to take to offices actually and work on that. And I think these are very workable kind of suggestions coming through. And I'm really glad that's happening. So Anita ji, talking about how to really make everyone be a part of what is, again, a universe for everyone. When we're talking about equality, we are talking about inclusivity. What would you say as we are talking and we are interacting on this theme, how senior citizens and especially children, for example, you're talking about accessibility at public spaces, like you're talking about wheelchair to be taken to merry-go-round. I mean, different kind of activities that children get into and how that can be facilitated more. So tell us more about that idea as to what can be done there, where children mingle and they come together and nobody's left out.
Right. So I think this question comes from the background that we have installed some accessible play equipment in a public park in Pune. We made sure that we chose a park near the Pune Reptile Park, the snake park where everybody comes, and the Pune Zoo. So it's a very small space that we got from the local corporator, the person who works with the Pune Municipal Corporation. There was no funding forthcoming from the Pune Municipal Corporation, so we had a very tiny budget. But what we did was to put in a swing that could take a wheelchair. We put in a merry-go-round on which a wheelchair could go. And then there are swings, and the swing seats are such that the knees are a little raised and the body is sort of reclined to the back, so that a child who does not have control over the upper body will not fall off the swing. So for balance of a child who has balance challenges, right? So such equipment has been installed there. There is a seesaw which has seat belts so that a child who's sitting on the seesaw will not fall off. Why was this installed in a public park and not in a special school is because inclusive play has to happen. The first thing we do when we are growing up is to play together. And once children have understood people with disabilities and that they have peers with disabilities, you have played with them, you have grown up with them, the conversations between children are much simpler and more honest than conversations between adults, if you notice. So a child will walk up to another child who's on a wheelchair and very simply ask, why are you on a wheelchair? Why are you limping today? Why are you using crutches? And that child can explain. And the child will explain equally innocently. Whereas this can be seen as an offensive question when you ask an adult. So when the understanding begins at that age, when conversations start at that age, it becomes easier for us to convince and talk to adults who are in positions of power tomorrow, decision-making positions in the governments, in companies. Often when you go into a company and talk to a CEO or the CSR head, they don't even understand what you're talking about when it comes to accessibility. Why should a park be accessible? Because inclusion has to begin there, at the beginning, at play, right? So we have also come out with coloring pages and with storybooks. So what we want is that these conversations should happen at the dining table in families. Like Parul and Kush both said, and also Gaurav, every family will probably have one person with a disability, one member with a disability, or a neighbor with a disability. So all of us know, each of us knows at least one person with a disability, which means we should start having these conversations. I'm sure conversations around gender, especially the feminine, didn't happen about 100 years ago. But today, in every panel, you find that the majority is women, especially when we are talking about social work and all of it. If you look at all the panels that you have put up in this particular summit, you'll find so many women are participating. This would not have been the case 100 years ago. So we have to plan our world in such a way that, 10 years down the line, there will be people with disabilities representing themselves as equals. And that will only happen when we start interacting with them right from the start, in schools, in parks, etc.
Yeah, since you mentioned this, let me say more about even myself that, right now I lead a platform on gender, which is called Her World. And I have had, experience of also being a director at Women's Future Service. So gender issues also is are issues that we will be talking about. Apart from me being a broadcaster, so I have had a stint with Zee News, Doordarshan, and Rajyasabha TV also where through TV we not only talk about political and governance matters, but also these very, very important social matters. And that's where I would like to come to Dr. Raheja here. Dr. Raheja, in terms of planning, sometimes we've seen that the gender lens needs to be focused on more. Do you think it's happening? And do you think when one is planning the whole architectural design, the gender aspect is also now being looked at?
Yeah, Rakhi, I think before I answer, I forgot my pictorial description. So for the benefit of the audience, let me also describe that I am a 43-year-old male, North Indian, and wearing a red-colored pullover with a blue-collared shirt, which is not metaphoric, but is actually a blue-colored shirt. Coming to the question on gender, I think it's a very, very serious question that you've raised. And I can tell you one or two small incidents that I surveyed in public spaces. And I can give a very small example, typical of Indian bazaars. Before I talk about women in workspaces, let me talk about women in public spaces. So how often do you see in a public space a washroom being available, number one, and number two, being available with a gender balance? And most often that we have found, and third, how many times would you ask a woman that would they like to use it? And very often, I would say in an ethnographic way that I have observed, that the answer and the chances are that women avoid using a washroom in public space. Number two, it is not available also at many places. And number three, it's not maintained to a certain standard which would perhaps become the right kind of choice for certain women to use it. And number 4, even when you look at transportation infrastructure, where the use of or the need for this toileting infrastructure, I'm coming to this word because I find these are things which have not been talked about in the past century, but it is a fairly critical point that that we need to talk about, because of which the rest happens. And again, I have to compliment here the idea of the government, which brought the National Sanitation Campaign, which, if it dovetails with the idea of accessibility, can actually impact gender inclusion in a fairly big way. And these are some very, very big challenges, I believe. Unfortunately, still the evidence to this is very less, because the confidence has not been given by the infrastructure, not just by design, also by the culture of its usage. Because I think, I look at this whole idea of access in then 3 words. One is information access. First of all, do I have the information that this public space or this transportation system or this particular built form has a available, accessible, or a gender neutral washroom available, number 1. So is there information available? So I would promote the idea of what is called as toilet maps of cities, toilet maps of districts, because that facility, unless I know, I would not even plan my travel to a particular place. The second thing is whether its infrastructure is the right kind of infrastructure. Because let's not talk about women alone. Women have been sharing and shouldering the entire social responsibility of bringing up children. I'm not trying to be gender biased here, but I see now male members have also taken roles. But we must accept that in Indian culture, this has been shouldered by women for long. So at the same time, the question is, what about women with children? How do they accompany them into a washroom when they go? And would then there be a child-friendly washroom is something, it comes as another demand. Now, these things have slowly started happening in facilities like airports, where you therefore now see women can independently travel. I think that's an infrastructure that one starts feeling proud of, but I think we still have to go a long way. And the third level, where I would believe most of us would agree that India is still 70% rural. While the urban gets all the light because it needs all the infrastructure, I think rural should not be ignored. Rural is not the weak point of India. Rural is the promise of the food that we have. So I believe the rural infrastructure, even including the gender inclusive aspect, when it looks at drinking water and sanitation, is something that I would wish to promote through this platform, is a very important need of accessible infrastructure in order to create accessible communities. Because a point I must say here, that when we have created independent washrooms in homes, there have been studies which have sometimes, killed the idea of women's socialization. Because certain cases in rural areas, women were actually moving out in that public washroom spaces. And I have seen examples in Bihar and several other communities at ground level where queuing cultures also are sometimes exclusive because of a caste-based or a kind of social status-based position. So I think these are all concerns that we have, and therefore accessibility needs to respond contextual to cultures and regions as well, besides the physical dimensions of it.
Anita, you want to add something there? Yeah.
Yes, and now that we are not only looking at the gender binary, we are looking at transgenders and people who don't identify as either male or female. We need more unisex toilets. Also, the fact that I may need to accompany an elderly gent like my father or say father-in-law into the toilet, or my husband may have to accompany his mother, or maybe me tomorrow into a toilet, makes it very important that the toilets are larger, as most disability-friendly toilets are, and also family toilets, as they are called. I think at the airports, etc., when you look at the signage, they show a father, mother, and 2 kids, as the sign outside instead of just a male or a female. So such toilets are coming up across the world, and they need to become the trend everywhere, because people who are transgender and who don't identify as male or female always have a problem about knowing where to go, which toilet to use, and there is always a little struggle there. And like Gaurav also mentioned, Indian toilets also need some kind of modifications and adaptations in the Indian commodes so that they can be used in the rural and in the slum settings. Thank you.
Very, very pertinent points, Anita ji, that you raised. You talked about the rights of transgender, and now they really need this kind of support and facility when it comes to accessibility. Also, I'd like to go to Kush here and ask him. Talking about again making them self-reliant. One of the things that I saw, while in my experience of knowing what, let's say, the government level things are being done. Or how can they become self-reliant? Some of these disabled people, there are schemes, there are things being done, but both at the government level but now at the corporate level also. How can they be really included more and more so that one is really self-sufficient? What is being done?
I wanted to highlight kind of 3 points in relation to this. So it's kind of a quick snapshot of what the UK government is doing in relation to this. So the first one I wanted to highlight is a program called Access to Work. Access to Work is probably the UK government's best kept secret in relation to disability inclusion, but basically it provides grants for reasonable adjustments to make sure disabled people are not substantially disadvantaged when they're doing their job. So it helps to create a level playing field. And these grants can be adaptations to equipment, special equipment or software, sign language interpretations, costs for taxi fares to get a disabled person to and from work, or even things like support workers. And recently, in the time of COVID-19, this support has actually now been made implementable for disabled people at home, because obviously lots of people are not actually going to the workplace. The second point I really wanted to highlight that kind of follows on from that is this aspect of kind of going from the medical model to the social model. Like what is it that disables a person? So, traditionally the medical model would state it's the impairment, but the social model actually states that it's the environment, it's the attitudes of people. And I think a really good example here is before, we were always told like is the only place that it's impossible inside one's head is basically the question that I'm asking here. Like previously, disabled people were always asking to work from home. We've been asking for it for ages, and we were always told it was impossible. With the stroke of a COVID-19 pen, suddenly everybody's doing it. Everything is impossible. And I see that a lot of times it's that the person's attitude is actually where it's impossible. It is possible because technology is advancing so quickly, but people don't explore. People are not inquisitive and to find out what is possible. The third aspect I wanted to highlight was there's a program called the Disability Facilities Grant in the UK, where disabled people can receive grants from their local councils, from governments, to make adaptations to the home. So widening doors, installing ramps, improving rooms, facilities like stair lifts, accessible toilets, adaptive heating or light control, which is really critical. If a disabled person's own home isn't accessible, how can a disabled person access education or employment? And the last thing I wanted to highlight here was I had the honor to actually to facilitate one of the last speaking events for Stephen Hawkins, who sadly passed away in 2018, but at his time, he was probably the cleverest person in the world. And I would question that if Stephen Hawkins didn't have access to assistive technology, would the world have benefited from Stephen Hawkins' genius? So sometimes I question how many geniuses like Stephen Hawkins have been born in India. How many geniuses like Stephen Hawkins are born in Africa or around the world? But because they didn't have access to assistive technology and an accessible environment, the world did not benefit from their genius. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much. I mean, these are thoughts that I think we really share, and I think just not on this session, but I think post the session, we are taking home these notes, as I said earlier. and things to not only ponder upon but also to work upon. And that's where I come to Mr. Parvez Sharma also, that talking about campaigns, and that's how we saw that legislations also try to then accommodate some of these very, very important points when we look at 2016 Act also. What would you say the government is now maybe learning more and working on these ideas? I mean, as we say that every time, every day we are learning something, especially in India, taking maybe inspiration from, as Kush said, from the outside world. What would you say are the new insights? What are the steps do you think which are very important and should be really worked upon? Crucially, Mr. Sharma. Can you hear me? Hello? Is there a problem of audio?
Rakhi, can you hear me? Sorry, I was on mute.
No, yeah. So, do you want me to repeat the question? Basically,
Yeah, please. Actually, I am facing some technical difficulty. I'm not able to, like every time you speak, so voice becomes very low.
Okay, can
when you are speaking. Now? Yeah. If you could be a bit louder, I can hear other speakers. Yeah.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Okay. So I would say that, the governments, of course, the citizens have to be more aware. They have to support each other. There has to be, in fact, solidarity amidst the community as well to understand, help each other. But when we look at the authorities, for example, when Kush talks about the grants available in UK, how the government here in India and the authorities are really looking at creating more such atmosphere. We were talking about how we look at, not only genders, but transgenders, all kinds of sections also, children, senior citizens. How do you think the government of India is really looking at going a step ahead? We are talking about more inclusion in the corporate sector. We're making them self-reliant. We're giving them employment opportunities. We are trying, as Anita ji said, we talk about inclusive education, not only the term as such, but actually literally also in the education field. So what would you say the government of India is really taking the right steps, especially as we are entering, we are in 2020, we're talking about rural and urban divide. How are we taking everyone ahead, learning and then walking further on ideas which are very concrete? To make accessible India, a campaign also walking on its top.
Yeah, I got your point. So as I earlier said, the intentions of the government are very good, and government actually wants to deliver right at the grassroots level to make the built environment accessible. ICT as well, but I'll be focusing on built environment because that's the session laws. So out of all my research done in the past, I think I'll try to highlight like where is the shortcoming. See, in my research, I have found out that we have a law in place like the RPWD Act 2016. At international level, we have UNCRPD. So we also have a political will. That's why the PMO office launched the Accessible India campaign. Now, problem lies in the participation of persons with disabilities. The various government machinery has failed to bring on board the person with disabilities in the decision-making, plan, preparation, formulation, and implementation phases. So I strongly advocate that this is high time when government should focus on these areas. Then another one is social beliefs. There is still a stigma in the society that, like Kush was saying, that earlier society is shifting from charity to social models, but still I think a long way has to go in India. So government still thinks that this sector of person with disabilities is still victimized. They never think that these can be brought on board at the policy and plan preparation processes. Okay. Then coming to the budgetary allocation, I think even though there is a political will and law is in place, but very less budgetary allocation has been done for the government departments for making premises accessible and allocating same budget for other inclusion efforts. And this needs a cross-sectoral approach for which there has to be, a mega budgetary support in a country like India. Like I'll tell you, the whole budget of the Ministry of Social Justice Government of India is less than the budget of a project for a major highway in India, right? So the ministry is functioning with very less budget. Then a major hurdle is the institutional capacity, because all the posts are not filled in the various government offices which are working for, enhancing accessibility and inclusion in our society. So these problems are being faced by the Indian society. We also need effective coordination amongst the various institutions and capacity building and sensitization of the staff, which is actually working at the grassroots level. Right now, what is happening, all the development authorities and urban local bodies, senior officials are well aware and sensitized about the accessibility issues after the promulgation of RPWD Act. But the staff, engineers, planners and architects who are working at the grassroots level are still not sensitized. They are doing mistakes in ignorance. So I think a mega campaign has to be launched for training of the staff personnel, for doing sensitization of the staff personnel, because we have the will, we can also allocate budgets. But if there is no sensitization and no training, so the threat is that all our energies will go in waste. Because to highlight, like retrofitting of a inaccessible infrastructure facility takes around 25 to 30% cost as compared to 1 or 2% additional cost when an infrastructure is made accessible right at the time of its creation. So this is one area I think we need to highlight. And like earlier, Mr. Kush and other panelists were saying that nothing about us without us. I think there is a time, new normal has to be defined, that nothing about us. So everything, every infrastructure in the country should be brought by taking into panel the most person with disabilities, which is the most marginalized section of the country. So I strongly feel that when we are designing cities for all, it encompasses all the genders, transgenders, even children, not only person with disabilities. So I think representation from these sections also needs to be there in the plan formulation and policy implementation stages as well. And one thing we forgot always in the government machinery is policy evaluation. We make policies, we have penalizing provisions in the RPWD Act, but where are the provisions for policy evaluation? If some law has not been complied with, okay, you have given punishment, you have given some penalty, and there are some legal proceedings. But what is the solution? Who is going to evaluate the shortcomings in the policies? So this is one area which also needs to be recommended to the government. And I think there is a big gap between the industry, government, and the citizenry and the political economy. So all these four pillars should come together to take forward the agenda of inclusion. Right now, what is happening, industry and the corporate sector is taking a lot of initiatives for promoting accessibility within workplaces, but they are not aware of the various schemes of the government. Like I know various schemes of the government where government gives you, reimburses the PF and gratuity if you employ a person with disability, but not many corporates, even agencies like FICCI and CII are not able to disseminate this information. They don't even have the notification of this scheme. So corporate world has to be told about this, that you will get benefited if you employ a person with disabilities in your organization. Similarly, if a government, if a corporate hires an apprenticeship for a person with disability for first year and consecutively for second year they give him a job, then the whole 1 year salary would be reimbursed by the government. So this is another scheme, but corporate sector doesn't know about this. So there is a need for bringing everyone together on same platform and initiating dialogues.
I think some of these points that really should be noted, very, very valid points. Thank you so much, Mr. Sharma. I would like to go to Dr. Raheja. talking about research also, of course, you're looking at the broader aspect, but talking about more research and understanding, because one could see when I handled some of, the assignments there, and one got to understand that how, for example, understanding the exact need of people with disability, and then working on those needs. So, for example, how science can come in. And just now, Mr. Sharma was talking about this chain being maintained, and a proper nexus, understanding. I mean, between the corporate, the industry, the government, and the social sector all together, where they all help each other in terms of understanding the subject, understanding the challenges, and also what are the schemes available. What would you say about how science and research can actually also help? And if there are things that we don't know about, then please tell us as to what is being done, Dr. Vanessa.
Yeah, thanks, Rakhi, for raising that very pertinent question. I would split it in two components. One component I would say is, what do we do with the knowledge, first of all, that we already have? I mean, the first question is that the accessibility that we're looking forward in the reality, is there something that we don't know about and that's why we're not doing? So what is the knowledge content about that? So for that, I think one option that I have is create what is called as a mind, body, soul model of developing a full program. The mind talks about the rationale, the intellectual component of why are we talking about all these things, and the details about this, whether it's the medical model, the social model, and why inclusion is all required. Second is the body, which means the infrastructure, which means the technical aspects, which means why do you need a curb ramp, why do you need a wider door, and how do you deliver it, right? And the third part is the soul, when it's actually experienced by the user. Now, exactly in the same way, when you look at the second aspect, which is the research, I think research has again multiple dimensions. One is a dimension which is called the fundamental dimension. The fundamental meaning, we're looking at a very blue sky research completely where somebody has done nothing about. And I can tell you, India has that one wonderful opportunity of area which I think has not been attempted so much as has been attempted in the other areas. And that's the research area of working on accessibility in resource constrained or low resource contexts. Because what has happened is a lot of technologies have been developed. Now, of course, by meaning technology, I don't mean to say only computer science-based technology. That's a technology which has anyways enabled us to work from home, has answered the question of what was impossible has become, I am possible now. But there are other technologies that I'm also talking about which integrate between various scientific notions and certain social scientific realities. Now, for example, I will pose a question because I'm coming back to basics. There are many people who still don't have access to drinking water and water in a sanitation system. Creating a sanitation system is one, but providing access to that requires some kind of a system through which you can even cross the thresholds of a rural system. Now that is a sector where I think some different kind of research is needed, which I would use the word is interdisciplinarity of research. So I think India right now has a lot of research where a lot of work has happened in assistive technology sector. The Department of Science and Technology has a separate program, which is called, I think, TIDES, which funds exclusive programs of ventures that people have for developing assistive technologies. There are programs in MITI, which is the information technology domain, where also a lot of research has happened. But
Mark, what would you say? What are the new learnings? How can we learn from each other, and how can we really gain more experience, awareness that everyone is talking about here in the panel, and that use that awareness, information, all the schemes and policies available to really hold hands in a much better fashion?
So I guess I can kind of share some of the learnings that I have in relation to the No Wheelchair Tax campaign that kind of transformed 206 NHS hospitals in England, helping 2.5 million disabled people to access critical healthcare. And like one of the sayings for me that really kind of sums up the campaign, it's actually one of Gandhiji's quotes. First they ignore you, then they laugh at you, then they fight you, and then you win. And that actually, the first three aspects of that happened to me on the first day. And that's why I realized we were actually going to win the campaign. So we had like the Minister of Health and Social Care in England ignoring me. We had Simon Stevens, the Chief Executive of the NHS of England, laughing at me. We had the NHS in London fighting me, but we were published in the Times, the Daily Mail, the Telegraph. We worked with MPs from all the main political parties to create systems change. And some of the challenges that I had, so even the phrase no wheelchair tax, I wanted to create something where the public would be aware. I wanted to create something that would be a hook for the media. But some disabled people were actually saying your campaign is not inclusive to all disabled people, because not all disabled people are use wheelchairs. And I said, that's true. But what I'm trying to do is sometimes the end justifies the means. When we make all hospitals accessible for disabled people, then we can argue about whether the phrasing was fully inclusive or not. So sometimes you have to really kind of seize the moment and carry on going forward. Like I found that some of the most powerful people in the UK were afraid to go up against the NHS, the last key jewel in British society for me, the fifth largest employer in the world. So some of the key learnings that I wanted to share from some of the campaign work that I do. One is to believe in yourself. If you don't believe in yourself, you can't expect anyone else to believe in you. And I find that confidence is the biggest barrier to success for disabled people. Two is don't be afraid of failure. I fail on a weekly basis, but with my failure, it gives me an opportunity to learn. It gives me an opportunity to pivot. It gives me an opportunity to be one step closer to success every time. Go for the moonshot. You know how NASA got to the moon? They hired people that didn't know any better. If they hired people at that time that knew better, they wouldn't have got there. So by believing in yourself and believing in one another and being a dreamer and a visionary, you can create systems change. Build bridges with everybody, even if they're not politically aligned with you. That was one of the key successes of the campaign. And it was actually implemented by it was in the Labour manifesto and the Tory manifesto, and the Lib Dems agreed to it before the general election. Because all the political parties agreed, it was implemented. Trust your gut and go with emergence. When there's dynamic change in the system, like what's happened with the UK, with Brexit, with the general election, there's also an opportunity for dynamic systems change to help disabled people going forward. And I just wanted to kind of just like mention a couple of quotes that I also really like. So one is, sometimes it's the people no one imagines anything of who do the things no one can imagine. And that's from Alan Turing. Follow your dreams and your passions, because you never know when it will come true. So those were some of kind of my learnings and insights. Thank you.
Thank you so much for sharing all that with us here. And we're actually delighted that all of you are sharing such very important points that will really not only gain us more insights, but also points that we are saying for everyone to take notes on. Mr. Sharma, talking about the law implementation part, I think you would like to share something as to how it can be done better. What lies ahead? What is the road like? Would you like to say something?
Yeah. See, I want to articulate here that accessibility is a precondition for realizing inclusive society, right? We all know about SDGs 2030. So various ministries of Government of India are committed towards working to realize these SDGs in Indian context. So this is the need of the hour that the Ministry of Social Justice, which supersedes the only Department of Empowerment Person with Disabilities, should come forward and should be at the center of coordinating cross-sectorally with all the ministries. And first ministry should be the Ministry of Housing and Urban Affairs. Second should be Ministry of Electronics and Communication Technology. And third should be Ministry of Information and Communication Technology when we talk about urban development and ICT infrastructure. The other ministry should be Ministry of Road and Surface Transport for looking at various urban transportation infrastructure in the country and what NHAI is doing. I see NHAI is every day, making highways which are inaccessible. They are blocking the sidewalks by providing barriers. And if you see the ramps, the gradient is 1:5 or 1:4 or 3 in some cases. I mean, leave a person with disability, even a normal person cannot, even stand on that ramp, leave apart, rising upwards on that ramp. So there is the role of Ministry of Social Justice and Empowerment becomes very critical at this moment. And I think the ministry also has to done a retrospective of what all data they are having, because as other panelists said clearly, like Gaurav Raheja said, that data is must, information is must for making NEC policy formulation. So evidence-based policies are lacking in our country. Right now, the Ministry of Social Justice has launched a flagship project of making unique disability ID cards for various persons with disabilities across the country. So in the process, I have realized that they are collecting very vital information about the age categories, what is the kind of disability these people are having, what is their geographical location, and how much they are qualified, whether they are having dependent or not. I think this vital information, ministry themselves doesn't know where all they can use. They should share this with the Ministry of Health, Ministry of Housing and Urban Affairs, because right now we are having information about the geographical spread of the various types of disabilities in our country. So various disabilities demand different kind of needs in terms of infrastructure based, in terms of information dissemination, and such a kaleidoscopic country we have that even the geography and challenges and climatic conditions and the needs of person with disability changes with on a region basis. So I think a strong set of recommendation needs to be given to the Ministry of Social Justice for compiling all the information which they're collecting through their flagship initiative of UDID card preparation. And this evidence, this data should be used for making evidence-based policies, sitting together with all other ministries working for the same cause of making inclusive society.
Yeah, very, very, again, integrated approach as far as different ministries are concerned, convergence, more knowledge sharing, and then, as you're saying, evidence-based information, Mr. Sharma. I think.
And Rakhi, I would like to add one more point. Like Ms. Iyer was saying, that some disability commissioners in the country are not, conversant with various disabilities. I have been sitting in the ministry. There are many commissioners who have been given dual charge. Some are handling, 3 departments. So they don't even, some disability commissioners were asking me that, can you send me the copy of the RPWD Act just 2 years back? Like Act was launched in 2016 till 2018, those commissioners have not even read the Act. And in a city like Delhi, which is the administrative and political center of the country, we are having no disability commissioner. The post is lying vacant for almost more than a year. So you can imagine what is happening in the remotest corners of the country. And all this is happening in urban areas. 70% of rural, like Mr. Raheja said, has been left, has been taken for granted. Those persons with disabilities have been left on their own. So who will be looking after their rights, safeguarding their interests? So I think government's role becomes prominent because they have outreach, they have legitimacy, and all the budgets and scalability.
Of course,
Thank
so
you.
a lot of responsibilities lies on the state. That's what you're saying. But I think all of you are sharing some very valid points, which I think can really be points of concern also and points of workable action, as I say also. Now, as we are just going towards wrapping it up, all just quick points. I mean, on the road ahead. So let's say very brief, maybe 2-liners each. Anita, I'll start from you.
I'm not known to stick to just 2 lines, but let me try. I definitely am, I started that way, and I will continue to say that awareness and lack of awareness will, sort of impede the kind of speed that we are trying to pick up in, making India a more accessible place. We have all the rules in place. All the corporates know that they have to employ people with disability, but then you have to have qualified candidates applying for those jobs. For those qualifications to happen, you have to have accessible schools and colleges. And then for that to happen and for people to be able to interact freely, it has to begin with play in the parks. So I think accessibility has to begin at the beginning so that inclusion can happen at the end, right? So if inclusion is our end, we have to begin at the beginning, which is awareness. So I think I will wrap it up by saying that. Thank you.
And I think in 2 lines you really done so. So thank you. Kush, I would like to come to you now. The road ahead. The road ahead.
Sure. Where disabled people are basically the largest minority group in the world. So it's already been mentioned, 20 to 25%, and we're the most discriminated against. But the truth is, if we work together, we can achieve everything, because there's so many of us. Sometimes I feel that our movement is slightly fragmented. So I learned from the Black Lives Matter movement that swept the world. So what I'm calling for now is a Disabled Lives Matter. Let's work together and let's be the change we want to see in the world. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Be the change that you want to see, and Disabled Lives Matter. Dr. Raheja, now to you. The road ahead.
Yeah, Rakhi, I think the road ahead, I would spin it in these 2 or 3 statements. Number one, that investment in accessibility is investment in life insurance while you're alive, not after you're dead. Number 2, accessibility is important because all lives matter. I'm adding beyond Kush's statement, neither black nor white, nor disabled, nor gender, all lives matter. If human life is here and it matters to us, I think then accessibility is perhaps the only way forward. And third, let's not forget, I know because we are talking about technology impacting us in one way, which is visible, but technology is impacting us in invisible ways as well. We are also becoming aliens, right? So let's understand we are becoming a new society in the 21st century, which has new disabilities, which are situational, right? And those situational disabilities also need to be integrated perhaps better, only if accessibility remains the DNA of the society and not just of the infrastructure.
And now to you,
Thank you.
Sharma. And in fact, one question which had come also, one wanted to ask, and the suggestion was to give transportation allowance to epileptic persons. You can answer that briefly, and also the room.
Can you please repeat the question?
So there was a question.
Your voice is not on.
Anybody can answer, because that question came as a suggestion to us, is that whether transport allowance can be given to epileptics. That is a question that came to me, and I'm just putting it, anybody can answer that, but of course to you also, the road ahead.
What I can make out, you are asking that whether transport allowance could be given to person with disabilities, right?
Yeah.
So I am saying person with disabilities doesn't wants any charity. They just want their equal rights. So no allowance is required. They are just asking to make all the public infrastructure accessible for all. And, it is their constitutional right. So who is any government to, give them some charity? That is in the mandate of the law of land under the RPWD Act as well. So the only thing is and because this is the ideal thing, this is the right thing, making infrastructure accessible for all. And this is high time when we all Indians can, unlock human potential and leave a legacy at the international forum. So I think we should take this movement and with pride.
What a strong note, Mr. Sharma.
Because I want.
Constitution is something that gives us strength.
Article 11, 12, 21, like it mandates, and we have a very strong act in place, the RPWD Act. That's why I think India has already got an edge We are already at an advanced stage, and it's just the matter of institutional training, coordination, and better mechanisms to be in place. We have the political will as well.
Yeah.
So that's from my side.
Thank you so much. And to get the essence from Anita, you're right that I think there are so many things that maybe can also be part of the next edition, Anita, when we further discuss more. I guess there's so much still left, but I think for now it is. And I would now like to maybe, as time says, I would like to wrap it all up. But before we all actually just try to give an end to this session's discussion, a moment of appreciation for you all. And there is something waiting from the organizers, Varija Live, which is really excellently hosted and organized this summit for all of you. National Ability Summit has been a 2-day affair. And we have had many important sessions where we took up important themes. And we will be taking up all those in future. And all these points will keep coming up. But now the time for some memento and appreciation. I would like to start with Aditya. Thank you so much and all the very best. And now to Kush. Yeah, here it is for Kush. Yeah, and now to Varun Sharma. Thank you and all the best, Dr. Raheja. A lot of insights came from you, and thank you so very much. And thank you to Varija Live, to Varija and the entire team. And here, Rakhi Bakshi, I'll always stand by, as we have all shared one thing, is that the strengths come from within. We have to believe in ourselves, but we also have to give shoulder and reach out by, holding out hands towards each other. And that's how we can look at a universe that we all, will be a part of a beautiful world. So thank you so much once again as we now go to the next session. Thank you so much.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Team Varija. Thanks, Rakhi, and everybody else.
Thank you.